Sick and tired of being broke, kinda over the whole living paycheck to paycheck thing? Well, let's change that. I want you to look at building wealth as a staircase. And our focus today is on that essential, can't skip first step. And if you're anything like me, you may approach a staircase in the real world and leap up it 2 steps at a time, but that is not allowed with our wealth building staircase. If we skip this first step, it is much harder to climb the rest. Now you're probably asking, what is this first step? If you have followed any big financial social media personality, someone like Dave Ramsey, for example, then you have definitely heard this one before, and that is that you must first build an emergency fund. Now, an emergency fund is exactly what it sounds like. It is a fund that you can pull money from and rely on in times of an emergency, a financial safety net. We never know when emergencies will strike, but they will. There's nothing that we can do about that. They can range from medical to home repairs, to car repairs, to the loss of a job. And if we get caught without an emergency fund, we can actually take steps backwards financially, which you'll see in a bit. Now, the good news is that building an emergency fund is fairly simple. What you're gonna wanna do is open up a separate savings account so that you don't feel tempted to pull this money out. And we recommend here at the Financial Bartender opening up a high yield savings account where you can earn 4+% interest on the money in your emergency fund. That money is out of sight, out of mind, making money for you until you have to call on it in time of an emergency. Now, the amount of money that you should have in your emergency fund will vary depending on the person. Many people believe you should have 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. Others are going to say you should have upwards of a year. Here at the Financial Bartender, we certainly recommend having 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses. What this allows for is both short-term emergencies and long-term emergencies. If you have a severe medical emergency out of nowhere, you can cover that. Or if you lose your job, having 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses allows you to not feel rushed back into the workforce, and you can take your time to find the job that is right for you. And if you're asking, how much do I need in my emergency fund? Then a tool you should check out is an emergency fund calculator, like the one I'm about to show you right here. This emergency fund calculator you can find on NerdWallet, and what it's going to do is it's going to ask you a bunch of questions about your monthly expenses. And once you put these numbers in and you hit next, you'll see that it will calculate 6 months worth of basic living expenses based off of the numbers that you put in. So take that number, and if you can get close to that number in your emergency fund, it means you're in a very good spot. Now, the logic behind an emergency fund being a can't skip first step in building wealth is this. We want to avoid debt at all costs. And I know what you're saying. Oh boy, here he goes again on another one of his debt rants. But guys, everything that I say here is true. Debt will only hold you back from building wealth. And it's a really simple equation when it comes to debt. Money that you owe other people is not your money, which in turn means you have less money available to build wealth with. This means we need to be doing everything in our power to make sure that all the money coming in is truly ours, especially when trying to build wealth on a lower income salary. And that's why we have an emergency fund. Let's say we are a low income earner trying to pay off our student loans. All our leftover money after our monthly expenses is going towards paying off our debt. Now, at first glance, this sounds really good. And when we position ourselves to build wealth, this is what we want to be doing, is getting rid of debt as quickly as possible. But I told you that having an emergency fund was a can't skip first step, and here's why. Let's pretend we get into a car accident. We have to cover some damages to our car, and our insurance payment is now increased. If we have an emergency fund, we were prepared. We can cover the damages to the car, we can survive that increased insurance payment, we can keep paying off our debt. We did not take any steps backwards. It provided us with a financial safety net. Now, if we don't have an emergency fund and we get into this car accident, we could be in trouble. We may have to pay for those damages on credit, and we may not have the ability to cover the increased insurance payments, which can lead to late fees, interest rates growing our debt, a drop in our credit score, so many negative things. We may have to halt our student loan payments entirely to overcompensate for this emergency. Now, instead of paying off our debt, we're actually adding more debt to the pile. Skipping that first wealth building step is actually pulling us farther away from our goal. Simply put, an emergency fund will prevent you from having to borrow more and prevent you from increasing your debt in case of an emergency. Now, an emergency fund is also essential when building wealth because it allows us to be able to put our money in positions to make money for us. And I'm going to repeat that. We want to put our money in positions to make money for us. These results are best achieved when we're able to leave this money untouched. Don't bother it. Lock it in its room, slide bread and water under the door for it to eat. Investing is a perfect example. If an emergency strikes and we have to pull money out of an investment account, that is a big no-no. And you guys know how I work. We're going to pull up some examples here. I ran a little investment scenario here where for 45 years, you put $100 in monthly, starting at $0. And what you'll see here once I calculated it is that the end balance is going to be $1,048,000. Our total contributions was only $54,000, but you'll see that the total interest due to compounding was $994,000. And if I pull up an actual chart of the investment year after year, you'll see the blue, this tiny amount of blue down here is your contributions, and the green is going to be your interest. Now let's pretend that around year 10 or around year 20, you suffered an emergency and you had to pull money out of this investment account. Look at all the interest that you would miss out on by leaving your money untouched, by leaving it in that account to make money for you. And I hope this example highlights the power that leaving your money untouched has. Let this compound year 30 to year 40. It really starts taking off and beyond that. But if we had taken it out at year 10, year 15, year 20, year 25, we would not have been able to see those results. When I began investing for the first time, I did so without an emergency fund. I was throwing money into assets super quickly, thinking the more that I put in now, I would see the results I wanted faster. And this is a very dangerous mindset to have when it comes to investing. Because forget an emergency striking, I just didn't have enough money for everyday expenses. And so I end up forced to pull myself out of all these positions that I entered before they had a chance to begin growing. In fact, a lot of times I had to pull out at a loss because maybe the market was down for a bit, but I didn't have time to wait for it to go back up. And I lost $8,000. Not my best moment. This is a perfect example of how an emergency fund would have allowed me to leave those assets untouched. I'll never know now what would have happened with that initial money that I put in, unfortunately. Now flash forward to the present, where I'm confidently investing with the financial safety net of an emergency fund behind me. And while I may be putting in less money right now than I was back then, my money is untouched and taking advantage of the power of compounding. If we don't skip that first step, the path to building wealth becomes much more easy and enjoyable. Now, on top of everything we've already discussed, having an emergency fund is going to lower your financial stress. And I don't know about you guys, but any extra stress that I can take off my plate is a big win. So when we combine the fact that we are avoiding debt, we're leaving our assets untouched and allowing them to make money for us, and we're reducing our financial stress, it becomes so clear why an emergency fund is a can't skip first step to building wealth. Before we can financially run, we have to be able to financially walk. Think of an emergency fund as your foundation. Look at it like a house. A house can have the nicest windows, the most amazing furniture, the paint color is beautiful, the kitchen is wow. If that house does not have a strong foundation, it's not going to last very long. So if we can avoid skipping this crucial, essential first step, we will be well on our way to building wealth on a low-income salary. Thank you.